Alright. Shalom. Yahweh Hashem Yahweh Shai Brakathum. Yahweh Shema Thumb Hashem Yahweh Shai. This is the Isupk. Started out at 1 West, 125th Street, Harlem, New York, in 1969. We're under commanding General Yohana. And we here to teach the truth of the Bible for so-called Black, Hispanic, and Native American Indians, their real culture and identity according to the scriptures. Okay. Now, it goes without saying, Blacks and Hispanics have been in quote-unquote conscious communities for generations now, many decades, trying to figure out who they are, try to go in this and that and try to find some kind of an identity. But we're here to show you what has been set up since the late 60s. You understand? Well, at the same time, you had a lot of different movements that were going on. This was last class. I'm going to go ahead and erase this off the screen. What's going on with different movements and, New York, different trains of thought, people thinking that we were Muslim, people thought we were, Christian in the Christian sense, right? Well, turns out they took our book from us, lied to us about who we were, tried to assume that when Christ came to save the Gentiles, that he was referring to every single nation, when in fact, he was just referring to the Israelites that had been succumbed to the Roman Empire. Basically. And guess what? That's exactly what's going on right now in 2026. Blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans don't know their real culture. They started to lose their culture in the time of the Romans. But the thing was, we still had somewhat of an understanding of who we were. You had a lot of Israelites. We had our own land at the time, right? Up until 70 AD. We had our own land. Right now, we don't have our own land. We got lands that we assume are sort of controlled by us, like Mexico, South America, Venezuela. But come to find out, we don't really have control over those places because at any given time, the devil could just come and swipe them up from their own territory. Can cause wars, can do espionage and all types of things to get people to riot against their governments and for chaos to erupt. And before you know it, their version of law and order becomes the version of law and order that includes you not knowing the truth about your identity. And so in the Isupk, we go against the grain to show you exactly who you are. That, of course, begins with the Lashon Kodash, whereas we'll refer to the modern Hebrew for things like Sabbath service. The Lashon Kodash is always going to be the forefront of our culture, okay? When we say Hebrew Israelite, Hebrew is the language, Israelite is the nationality, aka the bloodline. Okay, that's why people don't understand what they see when they see us speaking out in public at the corners, in front of the Alamo. Things that we say are very, very controversial, but it's all in good faith, understanding that just like how Christ had to go against an entire kingdom with the words that he said, that was considered to be revolutionary and what would be inflammatory words in today's speech. And nowadays, you got people trying to conform to the ways of America. We're here to tell you, Blacks and Hispanics and Native Americans, they ain't got nothing to do with us. It really doesn't. All of the confusion and language and all that kind of stuff, obviously, us being slaves and in captivity, we are speaking their languages, no different than how we've been in every captivity where we've had to mingle with the other nations and deal with their languages, okay? As far as like their cultures and the things that you would see in those places. Well, here, that's not going to be the case. And that's why it starts with this. When we go back to the basics and we look at the Lashon Kodash, these characters all represent certain things. Ah, ba, ga, da. Okay? Ah, let's start with these. Ba, ga, and da. Because we see very, very often another thing that gets mentioned in the comment sections in our videos. Very common one is, what is the star? They call it a star. This is what they call a star. This is not a star, first of all. Not a star. We're just here to educate. You don't have to believe what we're saying is true, but you have to understand that we believe that what we say is true. And that's what matters to us. And because that's the case, we have all the full confidence to teach this and understand it because we know that it's better for our people to live like this than to live like everyone else. And so it goes without saying that this is not a star, it is a name, initial, if you will. Just like how you would use your first and last name, the first character in your first and last name. Well, Hebrew didn't have necessarily last names, but would rather have multiple first names. So if I say King David's name in the Hebrew is Da wa Da, Da wa Da. So our school is what we're doing right now in this class. We're going back to the basics to cover some of the things that have been very much so misconstrued by people online and all that sorts of stuff. Comment sections and the internet in general is very negative these days. People just want to argue, they want to contend. And when all that, and I understand there's a ton of place for debates and all that stuff, that's great because it builds the conversation. But when it's in passing and not in the actual arena to do it properly, then there is no back and forth and no edification actually occurs. So what we do is when we have these classes, we actually get to the point where we can now edify and show people exactly what it is that we believe and how we believe it and get the further details in it. And so when we look at King David's name, Dawadah, remember there's no V in ancient Hebrew. So Wah is the character that you'll see there instead. Dawadah. Or David in the modern English. David. Okay. So that would be King David's name. Okay. Notice that technically it's not his full registry, right? So if I say King David is Dawadah, let's finish it. Ban, which means son of, okay? Let's write that. Ban and Na. So you got your Ba and you have Na. And those get tied together. Dawadah's name is not Dawad, okay? It's Dawadah. It's real simple like that, okay? So it's not exactly like how they tie it together like in the modern English. What they've done is they say this is a Da, this is a Va, and this is a Da. And so they've just basically said Davad, basically. But the way that it is in English now, at this point, thousands of years later, it's just changed. The rules have changed. But Hebrew doesn't go by those rules. It's a lot more simple. You do have root words and modifiers that adjust how some things are pronounced, but going back to the basics means going back to the root of those words and understanding and how to pronounce them in that way. Can't go wrong with that, okay? So as we go with David's name, and I'm just expounding on this because I need you to understand that this is not a star. Like this is literally, it's nothing to do with anything in the sky. We know that stars look more like this. Stars are round. Because if we're speaking facts, we know what an actual star is. Okay. We know what an actual star is. People would assume that the lines on the outside represent the astigmatism effect that you get from looking at a star. But we know that when you actually look, if you were to be able to look at it without your eyes going blind, you look at the sun in the middle of the day, the part that's in the utmost middle of it is circular. Because that's the shape that it is. This is the ball of it's an eternal flame, basically, right? That's a star. This is not a star. This is the name, Dawadah. And so his initials are what are put together to represent this signet. Okay. Most of the time, the signet, it just represents the name. The signet represents the name. That's what the scripture refers to it as. It calls it a seal, S-E-A-L, or seal. Okay. Or S-E-A-L. That's what that's talking about. So, Dawadah, Ban. I got to scoot down a little bit. Let me draw a line here so this doesn't get confusing. Ban. What tribe is King David from? Yehudah. Let's draw that. Yah-ha-wa-da. and then characters in English, just so you can pronounce it. Ha wa da. Yahweh da, which means Yahweh thanks, and also is translated in English to Judah. Okay, so if I were to actually write this as David, son of, the of is implied. Okay, David, son, Judah. Von just means son, so the of is implied there just for the sake of English translation. Son of Judah. Okay, but it's not over. It's not done yet because the whole registry. Of course, we go from David to Judah because obviously that's the tribe that it comes from. But then it goes one step further. Ban Yasher Allah. Yashar Allah. Ban Yashar Allah. Son of Israel. So in actuality, what our culture is not the kind of culture that ties you to a last name. In fact, our culture links us together through first names. So this just goes to show just how backwards the empire of the present day is in comparison to the biblical days. Okay, so what have we been talking about today? Here's the first four characters of the Hebrew alphabet, just to let you know that what we deal with in the Isupk is not a language that is properly known by the masses. Okay, hell, most of us aren't fluent in it, but we can read it better and better and are improving over time and using the language and practicing it and rehearsing the language and adding more of the vocabulary to our daily life. It is the assimilation of an ancient culture, what is probably, if not the, one of the most oldest languages on the planet. So when people have a misunderstanding, just something as simple as our family crest, okay? Now, why is it that it's this and not Israel? Why is it that it's that? Well, it's because it was at this point, as the scripture prophesied, that through that seed that would be the king of Israel, right? It goes without saying, through the root of David. Okay, that's why the scripture refers to, when you hear the phrase in the scriptures, the root of David is referring to the lineage that was set up to have the king that would rule over Israel forever. It just so happens that King David was a part of that lineage. Okay, but King David had a son, and his name was Solomon. Okay, so let's go ahead and get that name. That's another very important name. So if I go Solomon, here we go. Let's get that. Solomon. Shalomon. Let's get Solomon's name. Sha, La, Ma, Ha. Shalomon. This is Solomon right here. Why is it that we use this quote unquote stars? Again, it's not a star. It is a name. It is a signet that represents the name. This is again referred to in the scriptures as the seal of David. Okay. Why David? Because it's through David's lineage, specifically from the tribe of Judah, because there's a lot of Judites out there. You understand? But specifically from the seed within Judah, the tribe, the people of the tribe of Judah, from the lineage of King David, that would produce the lineage that would lead to the king of Israel. So what people don't understand when they see this and then they pit it against this, they don't realize that Christianity is not supposed to really exist, at least in the form that it is today. Christianity is not, it's not a culture. It's a religion that has been created to separate the bloodline and lineage and the importance of a man having a son and that son having another son and another son having another son, because that leads all the way to Christ. Now, because they can't prove that Christ is a Edomite or a Caucasian, what happens is they've started to over time remove that affiliation, and then also Christianity has also been created to water down the importance of what the name Israel actually means. Because when we say Israel, we're talking about all the 12 tribes of Israel that Christ also came from and is king over. You understand? And of course, the tribes of Israel are to have dominion over the whole earth. But the problem is, the people that claim to be Israel today, they're not the real Israelites. And so there's no peace in that land. There's no understanding. They don't even understand what this name actually is saying, because they don't even use this Hebrew. They use this Hebrew. And you can't make that with that character right there, because the Da in the modern Hebrew looks more like this. And you can't get that out of this. So they're not even using the correct alphabetical characters that can create the understanding of what this name means. Okay, that's what we're trying to get you to understand. You're not looking at a star, you're looking at a name. That name, King David, belongs to a lineage. We wrote it right here, so you see it right in front of you. Dawadah ban Yahawada ban Yasharallah. If I were to do the same thing with King Solomon, it's the same thing. Technically, Solomon, you could say ban Dawadah. That wouldn't be incorrect to say, but when, for the sake of your registry, it skips to the Israelite tribe and then Israel himself. That's how the registration typically goes. However, there are, and of course, instances in the scripture, especially at the beginning of any particular book, it'll go over the entire lineage of whoever the book is about. If it's like one of the prophets, like Jeremiah, or even Christ himself in the book of Matthew chapter 1, or Luke, I think it's Luke chapter 3, where it goes through the whole lineage, and then you actually see, for example, in this case, Solomon, Ban Dawadah, Ban, whoever Dawadah's father was it Jesse or something like that? And then goes all the way very specifically to fill in even those gaps, okay? But for the sake of the registry, and especially for those that come up in here and read during the Sabbath service, you need to understand why we say the things that we say. So Solomon, Shalamah, it would be, of course, Ban, Yahawada, Ban, Yasharallah. Yeah, Shar Allah. And that just follows right along with this. You don't have to write it, but I'm gonna write it anyways for y'all. Ban, Yahawada, Ban, Yasharallah. And that's just Solomon, son of Judah, son of Israel. So that's what it is. Every Israelite, what we do when we state our registry. Now, of course, I love my father. My father in the flesh, his name is Joel. But if I state my registry, I'm not going to say son of Joel. I would say son of Zabalawan, because ultimately, right before you get to Israel, the other most important thing about the nation that you come from is the tribe that you come from. So even Solomon, when stating his registry, is not going to list all the brothers that are going to leave up to him. Of course, it's great if you have that information, but us being in captivity, it's very hard to track all of that And you're not going to get the truth about that if you follow a 23andMe genetic code test, because that's not going to take into account just your forefathers. It's going to take into account a lot of other nationalities and ethnicities that come from your mother's side of the family, right? So that's not biblically important. Obviously, having genetics from all different places, if someone does a 23andMe, I'm like, oh, I'm 2% this and 7% that. Okay, but what about your father's father's father? Because biblically, that's what is tracked genetically. And of course, what affects the way that you look is, of course, affected by all these different influences from other sources. But genetically speaking, that's how the world looks at it. Biblically speaking, this is how we look at it. That's why this is so important, because this signet represents our nation. No different than the president's seal of approval represents the United States, which is the nation or of America, right? People can understand that. People can represent and respect that. There's a seal for each corps of the military. There's a seal for the Marines. There's a seal for the Air Force. There's a seal for the Army and the Navy. There's probably going to be one for the Space Force if they haven't made one already. But that signet represents the name of that company, that government, that nationality. So when we wear that, it is a sign of our nation. It is not something that we're taking from somebody else. We're just realizing that, oh, that's our family. Now, if we all wear this signet, it represents this name. The 12 tribes of Israel, those that come from Ban Yasharallah, Judah, Benjamin, Levi, Simeon, Manasseh, was it Gad, Reuben, Naphtali, Asher, Issachar? I'm not sure if I forgot any of them. But of course, the 12 sons of Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel, that's going to be the people that we prioritize in our day-to-day lives, in our cultural understanding, who we edify. So when we go out to teach, we, of course, speak in a broad, generalistic sense, but what it comes down to is, who are we speaking to primarily, and who are we drawing attention to? Even when we speak about the other nations and the things that they've got going on and the judgments that God has in store for them, we're not even doing it to get your attention. We're doing it to get the attention of those that belong under this signet right here, because we want to get our family back together. When we see that, people don't understand how important it is for our family to come back together. They're too busy worried about whether or not this has something to do with some false god named Renfan or something like that, when really that's just something that the other nations have done and has nothing to do with this originally. Because now you look at the original language, you realize that that's just the characters in our language. So it's not, has nothing to do with some kind of celestial body. All right, I wanted to get that out on the airways first and foremost, because this is something that people stumble with quite often. And I'm gonna tell you right now that it's at the point where the whole world has a really bad outlook on just seeing that. I'm gonna prove it to you, because it's in the Bible that this was going to happen. We wouldn't just say that it was going to happen and then not show you. So let me show you. See you lost. I just gotta look it up real quick, y'all. Bear with me 1 second. It's in the Apocrypha. The Apocrypha. Let's get it. I'm gonna write it in green. 2nd Ezra 10 and 23. What the hell? 2nd Ezra 10 and 23. go ahead and write in the regular markers. This one is not very bright. I want to make sure that it's easily legible for those that are watching the stream. Matter of fact, let me double check, make sure the comments is if there's any comments. But I need y'all to, of course, the students that tune in, make sure that you pull the scripture from your Apocrypha, of course, which is in your 1611 King James Bible, right? So let me double check that real quick. And then we'll actually break that scripture down. It goes right along with what we're talking about. So we got so this scripture, it says, and that which is greatest of all. Let's get it. The seal of Sion. That's what the scripture refers to this as. Have now lost her honor. For she is delivered into the hands of them that hate us. I know my handwriting is terrible, but we needed to put that whole scripture on the screen there. It's kind of hard to write without any lines, right? But anyways, so 2nd Ezra 10 and 23, it says, and that which is greatest of all, the seal of Sion, hath now lost her honor. When it's referring to her, it's just referring to the signet itself, okay? Again, it's not put on no pedestal or nothing like that. But when it's saying greatest of all means what? Because it's not even about it being the shield of David at that point. Because once this was created to represent the nation of Israel, it represents Israel and not just David himself. King David wouldn't use that as a way to just simply glorify himself. It is a way for him to make a seal that represents the entire nation. That's why it says the signet represents the name, but more importantly, what name? Well, we know it where it literally means King David, but it ultimately means Israel, and that's why the scripture says seal of Sion. So don't call it the Star of David. That's incorrect. Y'all call it, the world calls it, I'm writing in red just so you know it's not right. The Star of David. The Bible calls it calls it the seal of Zion, aka Zion. Zion, Zion, representing Israel, because that would represent the land of Israel. Does that make sense? Obviously, the land of Israel today has lost its honor, for it has been delivered to the hands of them that hate us. That's why it says the seal of Zion. If I were to have taken over the United States through force and have then taken on its signet, and it now represents the things that I say as a tyrant over the United States, then that original purpose that it was created to be no longer represents its original purpose. It then represents the purpose of the one that took it over, tries to rewrite the history, and then goes on and creates mass genocides and wars and is trying to actively take over more and more parts of that land. That's why it's lost its honor, because now it belongs to those that actually hate the real Israelites. And a lot of other people too. They're arguing, they're fighting with people in Yemen, they're fighting people in Iran, in Syria, and hell, they don't even like Turkey, even though technically they're allies with Turkey. They don't even like Saudi Arabia. They want to take more land from Saudi Arabia. They just got through talking about the Greater Israel Project between Tucker Carlson and some goofball that's from the people that use this symbol today, that it doesn't belong to. It's like the name got stolen, the representation got stolen, and now the understanding of what it is also has been erased from history. That's why the scripture says in the book of Psalm chapter 83 that there is a confederacy of them, that it says that they would make it a point to make the remembrance of Israel disappear from among men. Meaning who? The real Israel. Because now there is somebody that calls himself Israel, but it goes on to list the confederacy, and the very first name mentioned in the confederacy, it says the tabernacles of Edom. The tabernacles would mean the ones that are in the spiritual seat of Edom, meaning what? Meaning they're quote unquote priesthood, they're quote unquote religious leaders, and that's exactly who runs the land of Israel today. So don't try to argue with it. There's no point in trying to argue with it. The whole entire world now sees clearly that there isn't honor with that nation. They may have the technology, they may have the control over the government through bribery and through money laundering and all that kind of stuff, influencing government officials and presidential politics and all that kind of stuff. They have their hand in a lot of that stuff, and that's why you're looking at a possible world war right now, or at least a very highly escalated powder keg right there on the coast of Iran roundabout. You understand? And not just Iran, but that's always been the goal, even from the late 80s and early 90s, from the Gulf Wars and all the wars that deal in the land of oil and deal with the overall the need for expansion, so that they can try to hold on to this seal. I don't hope y'all don't. You know what the craziest thing is? Think about this for a second. They doing all of that. This is why I wanted to do this class today, because we've been on this for over 30, 40 minutes. Matter of fact, the class is probably going to be about an hour, right? But I want y'all to see that this symbol right here that y'all are arguing as a star, they're doing everything to take over not just the land of Israel today, because you see what they're doing on the Gaza Strip, pushing people out no matter what the cost is. They're picking fights and insinuating that in the future that there will be more annexation of land that consists of the whole entire Middle East, parts of Syria, parts of Saudi Arabia, other side of, on the side where Egypt is at from the Nile, you understand, the Red Sea. So it's like, that's what all of this is fought over, to hold on to the signet under their control. So people don't understand that. When they look at this, they think that this means something bad. We're telling you, yeah, it does now. But why we wear it is because we are converting it back to its original purpose. We're doing that by using this language once again that even they threw away. They don't use that language. They wouldn't dare use it. They're not supposed to use it. For whatever reason, they ran from it. They didn't want the responsibility of actually trying to take it all the way through and take the language and everything. They had to go and switch it up and influence other ways to use the language in a different form and mix it with their cultures from Amalek and whatnot. So that's what they've done. But this image, this signet right here is so important for them to try to keep under their control that World War III will be fought over being able to hold on to that image, to hold on to it and try to assume that it's theirs, to try to hold on to a lie. That's what it is. That's the truth about it. So when we don't call it the Star of David, we do call it the Shield of David, but more importantly, the Bible calls it the Seal of Zion. Okay? That's what it is. It's the signet that represents the 12 tribes of the nation of Israel. That's what it is. I hope that y'all can understand that, because it's really that simple. What we're doing in the UPK is exactly what the scripture said would happen. That he would take fools from the gutter, from the bottom, from the most decrepit parts of the societies and raise them up to be prophets. That the fools would confound the wise. And the way that we're doing it is by actually being the real Israelites and having the Spirit given to us to be able to look at these facts and understand that it is our culture that we're taking back because it belongs to us and not them. And until it belongs to us again as a nation, and until the land actually comes back unto the dominion of Christ, this is going to be a signet that you'll see in the kingdom of heaven, because it's going to then have its honor back. It's going to then be under the correct representation. And that even Christ would give credence to this name and would understand that it's not something that represents him or Solomon or David. It represents Israel ultimately. And it just so happens, and if you just look at it, that I drew it more correct over here. Then it's got 12 sides on it. Shoot, I mean, there, boom. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Whatever, right? 12 sides. Okay, 12 tribes. Feel me? You just look at it and you can see it. But that's what our language is simple. These are characters that represent the ancient Hebrew. And what we've done here today is we've established a baseline for what it means to actually have that on your garment, to have that, as a part of your name. I don't understand why people would try to denounce this, especially people that try to call themselves Israelites, because you're supposed to have your registry as something that you state, the person that you are, of course, your ceremonial name, your Hebrew name, then the tribe that you come from the nation of Israel. And so this is a major part of that, to understand that, because without this, you wouldn't understand the importance of this. And without this, you wouldn't understand the importance of this. But now you think that it's a star, you think that it has something to do with some other gods. You get high and watch YouTube videos where they're over here showing you the Illuminati and the eye of the pyramid and all that kind of stuff. And then they show you that symbol and they call it something else, right? Because I think here's what I think. It's just bear with me. I don't really know how to draw this. I've never really done it before. But I think that the reason why they get all caught up is because they think of this. They think of a starfish, because the pentagram star is something that they associate with Satanism and all that kind of stuff. And then so somehow adding one more makes it like, I don't know, even worse or something like that. I don't know. But what I'm just telling you is that that's not even our culture anyways. That's not even our language. This is our language, though. So that's what we're going to stick with. And that's why we teach that it's the signet of David, of the seal of Zion. And so it's not something for you to get all spooked out about or anything like that. It's literally just us showing you this is the nation that we are from. Okay. Now it's funny too, because like if I'm wearing a Magan Dawada on like a chain, and I go to anywhere, whether it be the store, whether it be a hospital, doctor's office, whatever, right? And then you might come across somebody that would call themselves a quote unquote modern day Jew, right? Somebody that's Israeli, and they see that, they'll be first to question why you're wearing it, because it's almost like an insult to them to see you wearing it, something that they think belongs to them. But we're here to tell you this: we now see the BS in the world. and in the planet and the corruption of the governments and the people that run those governments and the people behind the people that run those governments that are in the shadows, that call the shots, that fund wars, that fund mass giant armies that move and affect the entire globe. When we see all of that happening, and then you want to argue with us about something as simple as this, you're just wasting time. You're wasting our time, because we could be talking about some very specific, more interesting things that would actually edify us in the world that we are looking at right now. Because as people are worried about whether or not our garment has fringes on it, and then why are we wearing what we wear, and whether or not this is a star and all that kind of stuff, there's already warships that are fulfilling prophecies that are set to unleash another seal, or another trumpet is getting ready to be blown. Like, literally, biblically speaking, prophetically speaking. These are the things that are going on in the world right now. We get so caught up in mundane things that now you won't come to Sabbath service and practice this Hebrew because you don't see an affiliation with it or the importance of it. But we're here to show you why it's important to go back to the basics so that you can actually have that foundation, because you're going to need a strong foundation when the whole world topples over. Okay? Don't let it catch you off guard. Don't let it catch you by surprise, because it's already happening. It's been happening. It's been happening for decades. It's a slow burn. But what happens is you get complacent with where you're at, and you think you've progressed enough spiritually where you just stop, and before you know it, you're backsliding. Before you know it, because you're not growing, you're standing idly by in your spiritual progression, there's a lack of purpose in your life. And so when you come to the truth in the Isupk under Commanding General Yohana, we're giving you the foundation to solidify your purpose. You understand what I'm saying? That's what this is all about. And so it starts with something as simple as this to let you know, hey, this is the standard. This is the banner. Come here. This is the place of safety. And it may seem like it's not safe because the whole world sees this seal of Zion and they see that it's lost its honor, because the people that are currently mishandling the representation, they have not earned that respect. It doesn't belong to them anyways. They shouldn't have it. But because they do, there's a lot of confusion. And so our school is created to break up that confusion so that we can actually all come to the true understanding of what exactly we're doing in this school. Because when we prophesy on the streets, when you see us using these characters, you see these characters on our garments, it is a echo of the past, but it is a forewarning of what you're going to see dominate over the entire earth. A culture of Blacks and Hispanics that no longer need drugs to be fulfilled in their life. They don't need to turn to our enemies to try to get their monies and funds to make their life seem prosperous. We now see through all of that, and it all starts with seeing through the truth about what this is and how it belongs to us in the first place. That's what this is all about, man. It's about us coming back to our culture and our heritage. And more importantly, it's about us actually reading the Bible so it could transform our minds and give us the surety and confidence that the way that we live can be improved, that the way that we are can be perfected as much as possible. Okay? Coming back to that, it starts with you coming back to your language. You understand? And it continues as you continue to see this and identify with us being the real Israelites, and then taking another step. And another step is coming to class, learning more scriptures. Because what our enemy has very successfully done is they've kept our youth, they've kept our adults, they've kept your parents, your grandparents from even wanting to crack open that book and begin to understand all of these names in the book. That's like the biggest thing. The second that a Christian sees Zebulun and Naphtali and, even the other nations, the Girgashites and the Jebusites, they start seeing names like that. They're like, man, I don't know what the hell any of that means. Let me just sing and praise and dance in church, and we'll, pass around a little grape juice and whatever they do, right? And then they eat pork after the service, or they go fill themselves up at a restaurant your family likes to frequent after on the Sunday service, and then the rest of the week you're just a slave. But the fact is, that's not what we're doing here. That's why our classes are here every day during the week, damn near. And it's funny too, because the one day where we most likely won't teach is when the day that most people actually try to go to church, which is Sunday. And sometimes we got classes on Sunday when we're graced by the excellence of one of our captains. You understand? And that's something that we might see sometimes. But the thing is that the edification has to continue. But the zeal for wanting that edification has to continue to grow. And that's what needs to be nurtured. And so when things like this and the confusion about it come up, don't let that deter you from where you want that you know is the right place to be. You know that this is the truth. You know it's time to lock in. Don't be letting anything deter you away from that. Because a lot of times what happens is if you hear enough, if you care too much about what other people think, it's going to make you lose focus. We want you to stay focused. Don't be focused on all the chaos, riff-raff, what people are saying online. None of that actually matters. It's just all noise. The only thing that matters is what's actually true. And so you want to find out what the truth is, you come to where the prophets is at. You go to the house of books. And that's what the Isupk is. And it started out at 1 West 125th Street in Harlem, New York in 1969. And we are under commanding General Yohana. And we come out and teach the truth of the Bible. The so-called Black, Hispanic, and Native American Indians are the real Israelites according to the scriptures. This is going to be a very brief, but also very critical Hebrew class that just, again, resets the foundation for those that don't really understand what it is they're getting into when they come into a place like here, and they may have a lot of noise from the outside trying to bombard you with confusion to try to get you to think otherwise. Because, again, there's people that try to call themselves Israelites. There's people that try to say this and that, and they have V's in their name or U's in their name on Facebook. And when they see it, I saw a sister said, I can't trust any brother with the name Ben in his name because it's not Bon. Because there's no E in Hebrew. So it's like if you're not actually trying to go all the way to the root of it, then I can't trust anything that you're saying. So it's like, don't look at all the other distractions. Try to stay locked in with the original source. And when we showing you today, by going and showing you that this is not a star, that it's the seal of Zion, and then showing you the original source, that's how you know it's the truth. Because this is the original language. This is as close as we believe that we could possibly get to understand things like this and understanding our culture and coming back to our heritage and not giving a damn what other people have to say about it, because we already know that it's true, no matter how they think that we're foolish or they think that we're off or what have you. We're going to show you who's off and who's true. We're going to show you who's right and who's wrong. And then when the whole world realizes that we've been right this whole time, it's going to be too late. But what we'll know is that it's not us that's been right. It's God that's been right. And he's had all the answers in the book, and they refused to read it. So now he's raised us up to read it. And we are just humble men in this fellowship and in this servitude of our nation so that we can wake up to the truth about who we are so the rest of the world can move over or get rolled over, because that's what's coming. I don't know if y'all seeing what's going on in the news right now, but you better get ready because things is about to get hot. You understand? Thermonuclear hot, damn near. Could be anytime. Could be right now, right at the end of the stream. I don't know. No man know at the time. But what we do know is that we better be rehearsing the righteous acts of the Most High. And with that, this is that school. The Isupk started out of 1 West 125th Street, Harlem, New York in 1969. Catch us tomorrow at the Sabbath service. It's going to be starting at about 11 a.m. Okay, 11 a.m. sharp, Lord willing. We're going to rock it out like that. And then again, for those of you that are in San Antonio, see the things that we're talking about, that are interested in some of the things that we say, rehearse the righteous acts. We got a double feast day, a double feature feast day this week, I believe Monday and Tuesday, where we'll be, of course, celebrating Feast of Purim. Okay. And with that, that's what our school does. We actually keep the actual feast days of the Bible. Okay. We go and understand who the people are from the Bible. We use the language that the people in the Bible spoke and not some other version of it. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're really about this book and the Lord and our nation of people, man. So catch us on with that. And with that, that's going to be the show today. So for those of you that tune in, big up to y'all for that. Share the video, like the video. Make sure to leave a comment. Make sure to mention your name, your city, you know what I'm saying, so that we can take note and register that you've attended these classes and have checked them out. And if you didn't catch it live, that's fine. You can catch this on Facebook, on Isupk San Antonio, and on YouTube under the same name. We'll also be looking to try to accelerate our production, get more short videos out there for those of you that have a hard time staying focused. That's why these classes are a little bit more shorter than our other classes, because we, especially when you learn a whole new language, we don't want to overwhelm you. We just want to make sure that you get what you need so that it can slowly build up. Okay. So with that, y'all take it easy now, and shalom.